My name is Nate, lawyer YouTuber, and today we're going to go over some of the most common anti-mask arguments. Welcome to the channel. My name is Nate the Lawyer. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this video. Now, in the United States today, there's an argument going on, and that's whether the government can mandate individuals wear masks in public. And when I say mask, I mean face coverings. Now let's go over some of the arguments against the government's authority to issue mandates that individuals wear face coverings in public. But before we get into any of that stuff, we have to start with one of the most basic fundamental principles in American law. And that is, no law is absolute. A great example is the freedom of speech. You can't scream fire in a crowded theater, nor can you slander or threaten to kill someone. There are limitations to the freedom of speech. So your next question would be, well, how do we know what those limitations are and who gets to decide what they are? Well, the short answer is the Supreme Court. Now, in applying the highest standard possible, if a government action infringes on an individual's fundamental right, or some people like to call them liberties, but we're going to call them rights here, fundamental rights, the highest level of review that the Supreme Court's going to look at that issue is called strict scrutiny. Now, under this standard, if the government is going to infringe on your individual fundamental right, then the government must prove two things. Number one, it has to show that it has what is known as a compelling governmental interest. Some examples of compelling governmental interest are public health and safety, regulating violent crime, national security. These are all things that the Supreme Court says are compelling governmental interests. But the court also requires that any action or law that the government passes to fulfill that compelling governmental interest has to also be narrowly tailored. That means it has to be the least restrictive means to achieve that compelling governmental interest. Without all the legalese, it just means that the law has to be written with as few restrictions as possible on the exercise of someone's fundamental liberty. Now, a good example of this is the cross burning case of 1992, where I believe St. Paul, Minnesota passed an ordinance essentially banning all cross burnings, which seems to be a good thing. But the court held that that law wasn't narrowly tailored enough to suppress the speech that the government wanted to suppress. Let's say there was a theatrical reenactment of a civil rights movement. And in that reenactment, they had cross burning showing what black people had to go through during that era. Well, the state wouldn't want to suppress that cross burning. But if someone puts a burning cross on your lawn, that's a different scenario. As of right now, do we have a compelling governmental interest? Well, the Supreme Court has ruled this year that yes, COVID-19 is a compelling governmental interest.
Initially, the church sued Governor Gavin Newsom after churches were deemed non-essential. Now, new guidelines say places of worship can hold services at 25% capacity or up to 100 people. But Hodges says the limits are still preventing churches from fully operating, and he wants to see a legal precedent set to prevent church closures in the future.
In that case, the church sued the state of California over its 25% occupancy restrictions during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in that case, the Supreme Court, just a couple of months ago, said that California undoubtedly has a compelling interest in combating the spread of COVID-19 and protecting the health of its citizens. So we do have a compelling governmental interest. But now we have to ask the second question. Is the mask requirement narrowly tailored enough to achieve that objective? Is it the least restrictive means? Well, along with social distancing, the Trump administration's own CDC says that wearing masks would reduce the spread of COVID-19, and they give the science behind it. Link in the description. So we do have our compelling governmental interest stopping the spread of COVID-19, and to do that, the government has required that citizens wear masks while in public to slow the spread of the virus. Now that also goes along with social distancing, keeping 6 feet apart, and other mandates that local governments have put into place to stop the spread of COVID-19. So what are some of the arguments against wearing a mask in public? Well, one of them that keeps coming up is there is no scientific evidence that masks are effective in spreading COVID-19. Now, this is false. For instance, the CDC under Trump's leadership lays out both the references, recommendations, and science that support masks helping stop the spread of COVID-19. And if you want the link to all that science and all those studies, it's in the description of this video. Another claim that you'll hear a lot is that, well, the CDC and Dr. Fauci said a couple of months ago that masks were ineffective. They didn't work. Why should we trust them now? My answer to that question is that opinions change with evidence. Science isn't something static. Science is something that evolves based on the evidence that we have today. For instance, at one point, science said the earth was flat. But then the evidence started building to know that we're on a round earth. Science has said many things in the past that will happen to be wrong. But when more evidence is presented, then those conclusions change. It's an evidence-based conclusion model. This is the reason why doctors don't continue to perform exorcisms. So, based on the evidence and the studies and the references, the opinion of the scientific community changed based on that evidence. And again, the link is in the description. Another claim that you'll hear a lot is that you have the fundamental right not to wear a mask, and that forcing people to wear anything violates their constitutional rights. Well, again, this is a false claim. Just like we talked about before, if the government has a compelling governmental interest and it narrowly tailors that response, then something like requiring a mask is obviously legal. See, the government does require you to wear clothing, loin coverings, for instance. See, when it comes to something like indecent exposure, the court found that the government has a compelling governmental interest in protecting the psychological well-being of its citizens. Here's the case site. Now think about this. Covering your genitals protects people's eyes from seeing something that they might find offensive. But covering your face protects people's lives in the middle of a pandemic. And mind you, COVID-19 is a compelling government interest, just like protecting the psychological well-being of their citizens from looking at someone's genitals. So, yes, the government can force you to wear face coverings, just like it can force you to wear genital coverings. And let's not forget, in some states, if you were to walk out of your home in the nude, you could face years, and I mean years in prison. So it's not like this isn't enforceable. The police force this all the time. If you don't think it's enforceable, walk outside your house without any clothes on, or go to a police station without any clothes on, and see what happens. So in one instance, yes, the government can force you to wear face coverings in public to protect lives and stop the spread of a virus during a pandemic. And the government can also force you to wear genital coverings to protect the other citizens' mental well-being. So what do you think? Based on the court precedent and the rationale, do you think the government can legitimately mandate individuals wear face masks? Do you still think it's unconstitutional? What is your logic for this? Leave your comments down below. Let me know how you feel. My name is Nate, lawyer, YouTuber. And before I go, I want to say one thing. If you agree with me, fine. Please leave it in the comments section. I love to hear your take. Also, I would also love to hear your take if you disagree with me and just why you disagree with me. It's interesting because I think the only way we can actually grow together is to find out where we disagree and to try to convince each other why we believe our points are correct. Well, seems like my time is up. My name is Nate, lawyer, YouTuber, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
And what connect?